Well, the conference recording has started, and we are indeed comfortably zoned. 420 Studios, Alameda, California, and bi-coastal. We're in 3 states. We're in Massachusetts, Connecticut. Tony D'Angelo, host of Connecticut Mornings. Hi, Tony.
How are you, Zig? It's an honor to be here with you.
Thank you very, very much for being here. And we're joined too by Scott Russell. Scott, a New York native from the Bronx, lives in Massachusetts. What do you say, Scott?
Well, it's an honor to be on your show, and it's always an honor to discuss Gil Hodges and his possible enshrinement into the Hall of Fame. I shouldn't say possible, because Gil will be enshrined in 2015.
That is the positive thinking that we're looking for, and we have a lot in common. We're all New York Eastern guys who grew up early Polo Grounds memories, and no one was more instrumental than Gil Hodges in the Polo Grounds for the early Mets. He was an original Met. Unfortunately, came to the Met as damaged goods. The Mets as damaged goods. He had a really bad knee, and in those days, had his knee been rehabilitated as knees are today, there would have been no question as to his Hall of Fame credentials, just his playing career alone. It wasn't, and that said, his managerial career is reason enough for him to be in the Hall of Fame, combined with his playing career, given folks like Joe Torre and Tony La Russa, Bobby Cox.
Right.
He should be in. There's no question about that. And had he lived, it's really sad, had he stayed healthy as a player longer, he would have been in. Had he lived, he died at age 48, so young to die as a human, and even as a manager so young to die, that Met team would have stayed together and much longer and been successful for much longer, and he would have made it as a manager. So that we have to argue about it is just the way it is. Scott, you wrote a paper on reasons for Gil being in. Would you take some time and kind of give us a synopsis of your reasons, because they were compelling enough to convince an old-time prejudiced New York Giant fan that, it's time. This guy should be in.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Let me begin by saying, first of all, I disagree with you that his managerial career should even factor into his qualifications for enshrinement into the Baseball Hall of Fame, because I think I've proven, let me rephrase that. I know I've proven conclusively, I have the definitive argument for Gil to be enshrined based only on his offensive statistics, and I am not even speaking of his incredible prowess as a first baseman, and I've never seen a greater defensive first baseman than Gil Hodges. However, I think we've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that Gil's offensive production literally is enough for his election. And for the record, Gil Hodges was elected to the Hall of Fame in 1993 by the Veterans Committee. However, that particular year, unfortunately, the greatest hitter of all time, and I'm not knocking him as a hitter, Ted Williams, was in charge of that Veterans Committee. And he made up a rule saying that all of the voters on the Veterans Committee had to be present at his home in Florida in order to have their vote count.
At his home?
At his home in Florida. And for some strange reason,
amazing.
That provision was allowed. Now, there was a gentleman named Roy Campanella legendary Hall of Fame catcher, and a wonderful friend and teammate of Gil Hodges.
Right.
Campanella could not attend the vote live at Ted's home in Florida.
Yeah.
So what Campy did was he picked up the phone and said to Ted Williams, he said, please, I have a vote here for Ted Williams, and I would like it to count. Ted denied the vote. Now, this is really absurd because Roy Campanella was in the process of dying, literally. He was breathing his last when he called in pretty much his vote.
At that time, yes. I recall.
Right.
And the incredible thing here is why Ted Williams denied the vote. And as great of a hitter as Ted Williams was, and Ted was also a legitimate war hero, not knocking him.
Right.
Ted was also a bitter and vindictive and petty individual. Sorry, that's the truth. Now, Ted was jealous of Gil Hodges, and I know that's going to sound absurd, because why would Ted Williams, the greatest hitter of all time, be jealous of Gil Hodges? Simply.
They both managed the Washington Senators.
Exactly. Exactly, Ralph. And not only did they, but Ted was reminded on a daily basis from both his players. I'm sorry. That's right. Ted was reminded on a daily basis by both his players and the Washington media of how much his players preferred Gil as their manager.
Oh, Gil was a super players manager, yeah. And Ted's experience the first year in Washington was a pretty good one, ironically. He coached guys like Mike Epstein, but he lost interest. Ted was a very quirky guy, to say the least. So do you think he would keep Hodges out of the Hall of Fame based on that pettiness? I guess you do.
It appears that way, doesn't it?
It
really does.
Example. Number one, that one vote that Gil did not receive was the one vote that would have had him elected. He fell short by that one vote. Ironically enough, earlier that year, another member of the Veterans Committee also passed away. His name, Red Barber, and you know where his vote would have went.
Oh, no question about that.
So it wasn't Gil's year, so to speak. And I will say this, too, about Ted Williams, or folks like Ted Williams, to this day, well, not to this day because Earl Weaver passed away, but Earl Weaver constantly argued against Gil's election and enshrinement to the other members of the Veterans Committee until his death. Why? Again, pettiness, jealousness, and bitterness. Because during the 1969 World Series, managing against Gil Hodges' Mets and being heavily favored against Gil Hodges' Mets, there was that shoe polish incident, in which case went against Earl's Orioles. Yep. And Earl took that to his grave and always fought against Gil's enshrinement. Very petty, very petty.
Yeah, whose shoe is that again? You know, that I blanked on that. I remember that, but was it
Cleon
White?
Jones.
Cleon,
no, it was,
okay.
Yeah, Cleon was the batter.
Okay.
And Gil walked out holding the ball. And then he matched it to the shoe polish on Cleon's foot. And then the umpire, whom I think was DeMuro, pointed to first base, and Weaver came charging out, and he got the thumb. It was probably one of the best moments in a baseball game you ever were going to see.
Oh, most definitely, Tony.
The great quote from that was Frank Robinson, Hall of Fame guy, incredible human being, did more for baseball. His great quote, though, was, "Who's Rod Gaspaw?" And they expected nothing of those Mets. I mean, it was a great year. 68, 69 with the Jets and the Mets, and wow.
Pitchers actually completed ball games. Seaver pitches guts out, 150 pitches. Today these babies want to come out at 60 or 70.
The numbers, guys like Marichal put up, Marichal against Spawn in that game they pitched against each other for like 18 innings, and Spawn's like 39 years old. Marichal's saying, if that old man can do it, I can do it.
And 16-inning game. See, 16-inning game, and if Willie Mays does not hit a homer to lead off the bottom of the 16th, for all we know, they might still be out there.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm guessing Carl Bowles is playing center field by this time for Willie. I mean, it's the late innings, and he's had enough.
Well, just briefly in regard to this particular study we've actually worked on and completed, I forwarded it to various people, and one person who responded was a gentleman named Ken Podziba. Now, if you're from New York City,
Ken Podziba was the female umpire, and
that was Pam Postma, I believe.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I came close.
But
she was from Jackson Heights. She was from Jackson Heights, New York, as a matter of fact, where some wonderful people have grown up, I hear tell.
Oh, yes. But Ken Podziba happened to be the president and CEO of Bike New York. But more importantly, he was the New York City sports commissioner from the years 1998 to 2010. And Ken Podziba is a very close personal friend of Joan Hodges, Gil's wonderful widow. And Joan got a hold of my study, the definitive argument for Gil's enshrinement, and Ken Podziba told me that Joan Hodges was moved to tears after reading it.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Wow.
Isn't that nice?
That's very nice. Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you, I've had the pleasure and the honor of interviewing Gil Hodges Jr. On several occasions. Guys, you're not going to meet a more decent, down-to-earth, grounded fellow than he is. I mean, you could just see how he was raised by his parents. And he's got great recollections. You know, he was that whole 69, the whole run. He was a college student, and he and Larry Barrow are actually out working with the club and doing batting practice and everything. And they're still playing softball together today. It's an unbelievable story. But you know, and he's got an interesting attitude. He's like, you know, whatever comes down, comes down. I'm willing to accept it. Obviously, it's the reason my mother is really still here. She wants to see it done. But he says, with all of the, whatever you want to call it, with all of the fanfare of admit Gil, it makes him feel good because every day we're somehow keeping Gil in the papers, and, you know, he likes that.
Well, Tony, you make a very good point, too, about Gil Jr., because my understanding is that the reason he is not more adamant and the reason he's not more vocal and fighting this obvious oversight even more vehemently is because of the fact that Gil Jr. has frequently stated that is not the way my father would want it.
Well, that's the other thing. Scott.
Yeah,
that's absolutely right. It's not the Hodges way. You're right.
Right. They were very, very understated and very proud people. And as a matter of fact, Hodges never got into that petty Dodger Giant hatred that went on, that was fostered by Leo DeRocher and Carl Furillo and Bill Rigney, and they had more respect for each other than that. And Hodges was physically one of the strongest human beings that ever lived, too. So nobody messed with him on that level. He was just like the quiet cowboy, like John Wayne kind of guy. Pretty cool.
Yeah, incredible strength in his forearms. Incredible strength in his forearms.
Yeah.
If I may, I would like to just read some of the arguments in our study to show you exactly why this is such an injustice. His not being. To begin with, Hodges' numbers, a lot of critics say, are not Hall of Fame worthy. You know, for the record, he wound up hitting 273, 1,921 hits, 1,274 RBIs, 370 home runs, and 1,105 runs scored. Now, when the Brooklyn Dodgers finally defeated the Yankees in 1955 in the World Series, it took 7 games, and as we recall, Brooklyn won behind Johnny Padres 2-0, and who knocked in both runs? Gil Hodges. Now, when the Dodgers, the Los Angeles Dodgers, defeated the Chicago White Sox in the 1959 Gil Hodges, Gil hit a mere .391. Gil Hodges had the second most RBIs in the National League during the decade of the 1950s, trailing only his Hall of Fame teammate Duke Snider. Now, I don't have to tell you who played in the 1950s in the National League, but it's quite a list.
It's quite a list.
Yeah.
Well, no question about it. You had Matthews, and you had Willie played most of the 50s.
Aaron, Frank Robinson. Ted Kluszewski. So many great sluggers. Now, Gil Hodges also knocked in 100 runs in 7 consecutive seasons. Now, a lot of people are going to say, big deal. So he knocked in 100 runs in 7 consecutive seasons. Well, Henry Aaron never accomplished that feat. Mickey Mantle, Mickey Mantle only knocked in 100 runs 4 times in his entire career, let alone 7 consecutive seasons. Oh, Mantle never even knocked in 100 runs in consecutive seasons. There was a guy named Joe DiMaggio who played in New York, who might have been the greatest player in Yankee history. He knocked in 100 runs 9 times during his career and once accomplished a feat in 7 consecutive seasons, matching Hodges. Now, if you don't think that's a great feat, knocking in 100 runs for 7 consecutive seasons, consider some of the players that never accomplished that. And these are all
Grand Slam. I mean, I don't have a record book or anything in front of me, but for a long time he held the Grand Slam record.
That's correct. That is correct.
But other enshrined players who never knocked in 100 runs in 7 consecutive seasons included Ernie Banks, Johnny Bench, Yogi Berra, George Brett, Orlando Cepeda, Roberto Clemente, Joe Cronin, Larry Doby, Bobby Doerr, Hank Greenberg, Rogers Hornsby, Reggie Jackson, Al Kaline, Harmon Killebrew, Ralph Kiner, Chuck Klein, Eddie Matthews, Willie McCovey, Joe Medwick, Eddie Murray, Stan Musial, Tony Perez, Jim Rice, Cal Ripken, Frank Robinson, Ryne Sandberg, Ron Santo, Mike Schmidt, George Sisler, Duke Snider, Robin Yount, and many other Hall of Famers did not match that feat. So,
and I'm not nearly, Zig, I'm not nearly as scientific as Scott is on this, and it's this wonderful work he's done, but I'm more simplistic. I look at Gil Hodges, who's not enshrined. I look at Tony Perez, who is, and I'm like, what? Tony Perez was a fine player.
I look at Ron Santo. Santo. I think it's a better example than Perez. Perez
similar by
is
position.
Comparable.
Yeah.
Perez is comparable. They both had a lot of guys around them, both in front of them. The Big Red Machine, the Dodgers, and Campanella. You had Robinson. You had Reese. You had guys setting the table. So it's a tough. It really is a tough one. But in today's day and age, and Scott, you poo-pooed the combination of or the significance of Gil as a manager, almost. If it does nothing but tip the table, he really would have been a Hall of Fame manager on his own, and he was incredibly. The '69 team was really based. That miracle was first seen by Gil Hodges in his own mind. And I did an interview with the late Leonard Coppett, and he mentioned that. He said that Gil Hodges was the first one with that vision, and he literally convinced guys like Cleon Jones, who were not easily convinced of team stuff, to keep it going. He was a great man, let alone a player, but when I say a man, a manager, a great human being that could motivate others. For that reason,
well,
that
definitely,
should give
and
the right
also,
idea.
Gil was the greatest defensive first baseman I've ever seen, and I've seen so many great ones, including Keith Hernandez and of course Dave, the former first baseman of the Dodgers. I can't even think of his name. Wes Parker.
Yeah, Wes Parker.
And I was going to say that. As far as I looked at Parker and I said, wow, that's the best first baseman that ever lived, and people would shake their heads and say, no, kid, you've never seen Hodges. But I'm sorry to interrupt.
Well, I think you both have never seen Vic Power.
Oh, no, I'm 69 years old. I saw Vic Power, who was a fantastic defensive first baseman, and still not in the class of Gil Hodges, in my opinion.
Okay, but that's a subjective thing. It's like Bobby Cox or Clete Boyer or Brooks Robinson. I think Clete Boyer was a better fielder than any third baseman who ever could have lived. Not based on having seen the others as up close, but like seeing things that Clete Boyer did. How could anybody have done things like that? I mean, taking away Brooks Robinson's World Series exploits, which you can't really take away.
Great point, and I'll tell you. I'll draw an analogy to what you said about Clete Boyer. Mike Schmidt won a heck of a lot of Gold Gloves, and many times Gold Glove winners, believe it or not, unfortunately, are given the accolades because of their offense, which is absurd. And Ken Reitz was renowned around baseball as a much better defensive third baseman than Mike Schmidt. To this day, when Ken Reitz runs into Mike Schmidt, he said he will actually jokingly say to Schmidt, which aggravates Schmidt, by the way, he'll say, "How are my Gold Glove awards? Are you polishing them and keeping them, dust free and everything?"
Right. Because they're really mine.
Yeah.
Right.
And he knows it. Everyone who played with the two know it.
That's a very good analogy right there. But boy, it was something else. Everybody has their favorites. Everybody has their favorite moments. I think the most heartening thing I've heard of in baseball for a long time was Eric Chavez, giving one of his Golden Gloves to his infield coach Ron Washington. Yeah. And in appreciation for the work he put in with him. And yeah, and it shouldn't go just to the best hitters, or it shouldn't be a popularity contest. Yeah.
How's this for a number?
Guys, this was pretty special. Can we do it again on a regular basis?
Oh, definitely.
Just certainly, and I'm regrettably I'm going to have to leave you at this moment for carpool. But I thank you so much, Zig, and I thank you, Scott, for allowing me to be here and for what little I can provide. But yes, this has got to be the year for Gil. It really does. Wait till next year. Wait till 2014, because this is a man who's well deserving of the honor. And we didn't even get into Gil as a manager. And really, he and Rube Walker had made that pitching staff, really what it was, and just the great pitchers. And I really appreciated baseball at that time and watched them all. But
thank
I'll
you
have
so
to
much.
bid you
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good
night.
Thank you guys both. I'm going to sign off in the way that I generally do. I implore people to keep their dreams wet and their humor dry, and to keep their kids off the laps of clerics wearing dresses. It's a good idea. It makes the whole family a better place to be. And keep your kids out of the offices of military recruiters. we have going on, we have always had going on, imperialistic bullshit where we go over to other countries and we take our kids, mostly poor kids, because right now it's an economic draft, and we use them as fodder to kill other people's children in lands that don't, we don't even know about these people. We don't care about these people. We don't hate them. They hate us because of what our government does. Don't make your kid, keep your kid away from those people. Don't make your kid fodder. And most importantly, keep on keeping on. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen. Great day.
Oh, beautiful. Are you still there?
We are. I am.
All right. Well, it's over, but thanks.
Well, you're welcome, Ralph. And at one time, if you ever want to get into the more of the statistics on Gil Hodges, just give me a holler.
Oh, absolutely. We'll talk about other things from time to time. Just come back as a regular, and it'll always be fun. We'll always get Gil in there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
And I think, did we mention Rocky Calavito anywhere along the line?
We didn't. In fact, my dad grew up.
So that'll I know, and that'll give you something to come back for.
Oh, my God, yes. But Hodges is my main concern, getting him in the hall. No question about that.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks,
man.
Thank
you so much.
This is terrific. See you
take
soon.
care, Ralph. I enjoy your post, by the way. Take care.